Henry Whitaker was 78 years old, and for most of those years he had been surrounded by family and friends. But now, his days were marked by the quiet creak of his rocking chair and the... One morning, Henry sat on a park bench feeding pigeons, as he often did. He noticed a young woman nearby brushing tears from her face. He didn't know why she was crying, but when her eyes flickered toward him, he smiled, just a small, crinkly-eyed smile. For a moment, she froze, and then, as though she hadn't expected any kindness that day, she gave him the faintest smile in return. That night, as Henry sat by his window, the memory of her reaction flickered in his mind. It struck him that maybe, just maybe, his smile had given her a fraction of comfort she hadn't expected. And that simple thought made his heart feel lighter, warmer, hum of the distant town square. His wife had passed 10 years ago, and his children, busy with their lives, called him only on birthdays and holidays. The little house on Maple Street, once filled with laughter, now housed only silence and the occasional companionship of the neighborhood's stray cat. One morning, Henry sat on a park bench feeding pigeons, as he often did. He noticed a young woman nearby brushing tears from her face. He didn't know why she was crying, but when her eyes flickered toward him, he smiled, just a small, crinkly-eyed smile. For a moment, she froze, and then, as though she hadn't expected any kindness that day, she gave him the faintest smile in return. That night, as Henry sat by his window, the memory of her reaction flickered in his mind. It struck him that maybe, just maybe, his smile had given her a fraction of comfort she hadn't expected. And that simple thought made his heart feel lighter, warmer. The next day, Henry decided he'd try something new. His life was simple, unchanging, and it wasn't going to suddenly fill with excitement. But maybe, just maybe, he could make a small change for someone else. So, as he walked his usual route to town, he resolved to smile at every person he passed, from the hurried shopkeeper unloading boxes to the young father chasing after a mischievous toddler. At first, the responses were mixed. Most people gave him a polite nod or a puzzled glance. A few smiled back. But over the following days, those polite nods began to turn into warm greetings. Store clerks started chatting with him. Strangers who frequented the same streets grew familiar, exchanging jokes and small bits of their lives. To Henry, it felt good, but small, like drops in the ocean. What he didn't realize was how far those drops traveled. Take the young barista, Rachel. She had been on the verge of quitting her job, thinking no one cared for her efforts. But when Henry smiled at her every morning and told her she made the best coffee in town, she started looking forward to her shifts. And Rachel's renewed cheerfulness led to her manager noticing her more, eventually promoting her to shift lead. Then there was Thomas, the grumpy, gray-haired widower from across the street. One day, Henry's smile tugged Thomas into a half-hearted grin. That rare act softened something in Thomas. That evening, he called his estranged daughter for the first time in 3 years, just to say hello. Even the high school boy who delivered groceries to the neighborhood wasn't untouched. Henry's daily smile made him pause, giving him the courage to share his plans of becoming an artist. Later, Henry would find a thank you card tucked in his door with a charcoal drawing of a smiling old man. But the one story Henry would never hear happened with the young woman from the park, the one whose tears had first drawn his attention. She had been coming from a doctor's appointment that day, wrestling with a scary diagnosis and mourning how invisible she felt in a world that rushed past her. Henry's kind smile hadn't cured her, but it had reminded her, just for that moment, that not everyone looked past her pain, that there was still kindness to be found. Months passed, and Henry kept smiling, unaware of the waves of change he was setting into motion. A year later, his house on Maple Street wasn't quite so quiet anymore. People from the neighborhood started dropping by, some with a pie in hand, others with stories to share. And every so often, a stranger would tap him on the shoulder and say, "I just wanted to thank you for your smile." And Henry, sitting in his rocking chair with the stray cat curled at his feet, would offer them the same crinkly-eyed smile and say, "It's amazing how much a smile can do, isn't it?"